and welcome to Look Down There, the show where we talk about all the things we don't talk about. I'm your host, Michelle Amore. My guest today is best known as the shop manager on American Pickers. She is the collector of all things vintage, including burlesque costumes from dancers past. She is currently residing in Puerto Rico and is working to rebuild the island and is dedicated to orphanages, animal shelters, and raising awareness of human trafficking. She is a beacon of self-confidence and body positivity. Please welcome Queen of Rust, Danny Diesel, aka Danielle Colby.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so happy to be here with you. This is such a great conversation. I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm like, when I think about, body positivity, I think of you for sure. I see everything that you're doing on Instagram, and just your message is so strong. And so I knew I had to have you here.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, thank you. Thanks. I don't think I don't think before I talk sometimes. It just comes out. And I'm like, no, I'm perfect. Leave me alone.
No, that's great. I love it. I love to get the real stuff. I remember back when we used to be able to have people over at our homes. I would always have a bunch of strippers over, and there was something magical about my kitchen table where they would sit down and suddenly everything would just come out. And so I like to think of myself as a safe space.
Oh, good. Perfect. I love it. I love it.
Speak freely.
I'm a safe space as well, I think.
Great.
For most.
Right.
And we can't please everybody all the time.
Like the truth, then we're safe. If you want sugarcoating, let's go somewhere else. Yeah.
Right. Don't come to a stripper if you want it sugar-coated.
No. All right. So you've got a lot going on, right? So you're on the show American Pickers. How long have you been on that show?
I think we're going on 12 years now.
Oh my God. Whoa. That's amazing.
I remember right before the show got picked up, actually. Yeah, it must have been like in the same year or the year before the show got picked up. I think was the first time I actually saw you perform in Chicago.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. That's so, a long time ago, huh?
It might have been right after.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been. Yeah.
So how did you bring your love? Like, what came first for you? Like, or did it all come together? Like your love of vintage and sort of this treasure hunting and burlesque, or did you find burlesque through American Pickers? Like, how did this all work for you?
Poverty, a Christian cult, and unexplained self-confidence.
Okay.
Poverty, a Christian cult, unexplained self-confidence, and I'm here. I think it all kind of started for me with just my parents were very, very good at making it look like we were just fine financially growing up. And we really, really, really struggled. I think when you're kind of born into struggle and born into a financial situation, it defines a lot of your life. And my parents never really had much need for anything they called it like worldly pleasures or worldly conversations or worldly friends or programming or anything like that. So everything in my life was very deeply ingrained in this Christian cult programming of Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's a very interesting background because there's a lot that I love there. And there's a lot of people that I love there that are still in the cult. I'm just going to call it the cult. And then there's so much body shame, and there's so much shame in general, and so much negativity about the female form and the autonomy of the female form And Jehovah's Witnesses are generally, when I was younger, I don't know if it's changed since then, but generally we're not allowed to educate themselves outside of the faith. So I went to school.
Like not just about their physicality, but not at all education.
No, wow. No college education. I mean, it happens, but not in large scale at all, And so, yeah, I was taken out of school in 9th grade and homeschooled. My parents, rightly so, moved from the Quad Cities. The Quad Cities, you're close to there, to Colorado, and uprooted everything because they saw danger. And they were right to do so because there was danger within the group I was hanging around as a child. I don't know. I just was very, very rebellious. And I just, my mental programming, they wanted me on one hand to listen to this very dictatorial, autocratic kind of very harsh Christian message. But then at the same time, my dad was always saying, teaching us, you can't rely on men. You have to rely on yourself. You have to make sure, don't allow yourself to fall in these situations. And so he wanted to have very strong daughters. And I have 2 sisters. And so I think that we, myself and my sisters, we all kind of just really bonded together on most things we did. We started a roller derby team together. After that was done, we started, that was 5 years. And then after that, we all started burlesque. I started stripping and nude modeling first because I was poor and I just needed the cash. And then I started stripping at a gay club, though, which I'm really fortunate for because
yeah,
it's you still get assholes every once in a while, but I'm really glad that I went into a really loving environment,
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how it started. There was a photographer back home named Dave Sorensen, and he just, he was a nude photographer. And my best friend, Nicole, who you've met before, I don't know if you remember, but my best friend, Nicole, and I used to model for him together and separate. And I think I was maybe 21. I had just had my son. And I could get $20. If I didn't have gas money on that day, I could call Dave and be like, hey, if the model didn't show up, I'm free. And then I'd have $20 for gas for the day. So it's little lucky things like that would kind of always be popping up. So that's kind of how it all really started. And I don't think I ever thought really much about burlesque until after I saw you perform. I saw Margaret Cho and Dirty Martini, and these probably were all your shows too. I wasn't in the scene, so I didn't really know. But and then I realized I could take what I do with nude modeling and with striptease, and I can actually make it real. I can make it really fun and have this great experience. And because we were so close to Chicago, we really got to see a lot of performers from Chicago. So I would go with my sisters, or I would go with my, just by myself sometimes. And Chantel, my dear friend Chantel Asner, who still goes to your shows, she took me to my first one of your shows, I'm pretty sure. So I think we were so close to Chicago that we got all this wonderful eye candy, and we got to also have the benefit of watching y'all up there doing these incredible routines and really celebrating all of your different body types and structures and colors and textures and, spirits and all of that. And so I think that really had a huge impact on, what we were doing in our really small town.
Right. And seeing that is so important. And I'm sure, you brought it to your town. You were in Davenport at this point?
Yeah. Quad Cities, Davenport. I was Iowa and Illinois. I was back and forth. I was river hopping.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I came out to do your festival. Was it just once or was it twice?
Twice. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful theater. I thought Davenport was completely charming. I had never been there before that moment. So, you were doing something really great for that community and bringing in all these people and showing them like, look, we don't have to have this kind of shame in our lives. And you grew up in that shame soup, right? And I think a lot of us do. I did for sure. And even though like I was working and being a professional naked person, I still carried with me this little piece of shame. It kind of like hangs on. Did you experience that, or how did you? We were talking earlier, before we started recording, about stripping off all the fucks. So when did you get to your last fuck, or are you there?
I'm not there. I got lots of fucks to strip off yet.
Yeah.
I think that it's sorry, I want to make sure that what I'm saying is actually really accurate and is coming from the right place, because it's a really an important conversation. And I don't know that you ever really do strip off all the fucks. You know what I mean? Like, I think that in time, I don't even think we go into the grave with all of our fucks stripped off. I think that it takes a lifetime to get to the point where, like, we don't walk by the mirror and go like this.
Right. Yeah. Just like judging.
Like,
right.
That's the point where I'm at right now. Like, I figure 45 years old, I might be 46.
Who knows? We did lose a year, so who knows?
Yeah, right? We're all leap year babies now, right?
Right.
I think that body image is something that's very difficult. And I listened to your podcast with Dirty, and y'all grew up in dance, and I grew up in dance as well. It was the only thing that I was allowed to do as an extracurricular activity outside the house. And it was highly monitored because we weren't really supposed to be out in the world having worldly conversations and worldly interactions. So it was a really, really beautiful and fun and intimidating and unhealthy time, because a lot of that programming that came from church was just further compounded by that programming that came from ballet. And I walked out of all of that with a lot of trauma. And so I think the beginning of me stripping off the fucks was really finding a great therapist and letting, bloodletting, let all the poison out. You have to let it all go on somebody. And it's really unhealthy to let it go on the people within your community or your household. So, and that is where we'll go if we can't find the right place for it. Right. So I think that's what really started it off for me. And my first therapist was, and I am bipolar too. I'm type 1 rapid cycling bipolar. So that's also a whole nother mixed bag of, stuff going on. So I think I did not know that throughout my life. And once I got into therapy, and I had a really bad therapist for about a year. And I did end up, I like being institutionalized for a while. So it's like all of these things compound to create this narrative that somebody else can really control and can shame you by and all of that. And I think the most important thing is just like taking ownership of that and whatever those things are, whether, like maybe the things people called us when we were younger, people called me horse teeth, or they, because my teeth are fucked up, or they, the little things like being called fat. That still happens all the time, because as much as I love Puerto Rico, it's just as fat shaming as everywhere else in the world. But I think that like really taking a hold of those kind of things and not allowing other people to have the power to hold it over you is where it started to come together for me. Because as soon as I understood I am not fat, I'm a human, I have fat on my body, but that doesn't change the amount of love, respect, or safe space that I should have, just because my body might take up more space than the person that's sitting next to me, and still to this day, like always, whenever somebody mentions my weight, which is mentioned a lot, And I'm with a partner who also is like, like he's a generous man. He's not a small man. So it's a really interesting thing. And I think that the most important piece of that is owning it, accepting it, loving it, holding it close, and not allowing the conversation to start. So if somebody comes in and goes, oh, you look so good, you lost weight, I simply look at them and I say, I don't talk about weight. We're not going to do that. I'll talk about weight in generalities. I'll talk about, like the effects it has on community, but no, it's not a conversation. I don't know you. It's not a conversation we're having.
Yeah. And
we can talk about anything else. The weather's beautiful. I just bought this dress, like my friend made me this ring. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, but that's a great example of having boundaries and using them to protect your own space. And I think a lot of us consent to things that we don't actually feel comfortable with because we prioritize other people's feelings and reactions over our own safety and comfort. And that is something that has really come to light for me over these past few weeks, quite honestly. Like it's a very recent thing for me where I'm like, oh shit. We were talking about backstage at shows, and it's like, there's been so many times where boundaries have been crossed, where I have felt uncomfortable and just kind of bit my tongue, right? Because we don't want to offend someone else, but we have to prioritize our own health, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a friend who used to say, and she is no longer a friend. This is what happens, especially in the times of COVID and racism and pandemic and all these crazy things happening in the world, sexism and all these things. And so our friend circle really tends to shrink a lot. And so I think in that space, I really just decided that the best thing that I can do is to love somebody from a distance or love somebody from up close. But either way, I got to love them and I got to hope they fucking get better and continue to do work on myself. And it's an interesting thing, especially when you are in a tight space like that with people and, because a stripper's dressing room is a very tight space. And
especially New York. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Are you in New York now?
No, I'm in Vegas, actually.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. And every like little piece of that space is claimed by something or someone. And I think that maybe that's why we kind of, in this industry, I've noticed if you can't handle honesty and communication, like clear boundaries and communication, you really can't stay in this industry for very long. Either it changes you so that you can prioritize boundaries and communication, or you leave. Yeah, because it's essential here. Because especially in entertainment in general, but especially with what we do in burlesque and striptease, consent is so important, even with the basic things when you're in a dressing room, just thinking about the people around you. That's it. Just having the periphery, that peripheral view, to not just see yourself in the mirror, but to also see the 12 girls behind you, 12 people behind you that are also hurrying for space. They need to get into that mirror. You should have done your mirror before you should have done your makeup before you got there anyway. You should have done your hair before you, just thinking ahead to actually give that kind of same safe space. Like you said, your safe space, to give that same safe space to other people. And I just noticed that the people who can't offer that, I just have to love from a distance. Mm-hmm. And I'm a very, very private person. I don't leave the house a whole hell of a lot unless it's to work. I don't have like a social circle outside of American Pickers or outside of burlesque. or like here, like maybe La Casa de Todos or, the Barks of Hope, like those are my social circles. And those are all communities that see each other, give people their autonomy and respect boundaries. And that's where I fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice outside of that is not a safe space for me at all. And I know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the last second. Sorry.
No, that's great to know that about yourself and to respect and honor that about yourself. And I think that's the thing that takes bravery, is to move into those spaces where you do feel comfortable and you do feel safe and you do feel loved and supported. Honestly, like you're talking about doing all of this work. I know we were joking about it, saying we're stripping fucks, and we can probably never strip them all away, but sometimes we don't even know what things we're holding on to, and sometimes these fucks reveal themselves to us in different situations. And I'm thinking about, we're talking about burlesque and people that kind of gravitate towards that industry, and usually the people who are in that industry are people who are already thinking and having these types of conversations, right? So you're working in this industry and you're also working in the entertainment industry, which may be changing very, very slowly, but you were experiencing a different level of scrutiny and judgment.
Yeah.
So, like how did that affect your self-esteem and your confidence and just your realization that you have to protect yourself?
My mom says I was born with a stricken spirit. That's what I used to say in the church when you had a really like a very rebellious kind of a child, right? And I think that part of that really early trauma really, like I said, it just really made me have very clear, hard boundaries. People will step on those boundaries, and on purpose or on accident. And I had a situation fairly recently where I was working with somebody in a situation. My God, my boundaries were fucking trampled. And it never happens to me because I'm always like, yes, okay, I understand you need X, Y, and Z, but I can only produce X for you. So-and-so could possibly help with Y and Z, but this is where I'm at right now. This is what I have. And I just ran into this situation where I worked with somebody that I had worked with for years and years and years. And it was just a completely different scenario. And I think like more than anything, realizing that everybody is changing. Our brains through this last year, we can't think the way that we thought before. The way that we thought before was our programming for that reality. And we're living in a totally different reality, and everything has to change, right? So I noticed like with work, and I'll be very real, and this is going to take some humility for some people to hear. And I hope they receive it with the love that I intend it. Cause I love my work. I love my crew. But I mean, we're talking about a very male-centric environment that supports a system that I want to see crumble and crash. So it's been like everybody else. Somebody has a job at Walmart. It's the same thing. Somebody has a job at TGI Fridays, or whatever. You're gonna be working for a system that is nothing more than a colonizing system. And so I knew that going into it. I also knew that it was going to be a great educational experience. And boy, has it been that more than anything in the world. It's been an incredible educational, spiritual growth experience. I've come to understand men's psychology and well-being in a completely different light than I ever did before, which I think is really, really important. But more importantly, I started to understand everybody else's psychology and needs and in a different way. And a lot of things are changing. A lot of things are changing within the industry in general. I mean, I don't know if television will be here in another couple years, to be quite honest. Networks can simply not survive with the way that things are going right now, especially with COVID on top of it. I mean, we are lucky that we survived. We're lucky we survived physically, but financially as well. It was hard on everybody that time, but I think it really gave everybody an opportunity to think about, well, what happened if we all just lost it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And now that we have this platform, what do we do with this platform? Like, we need to get real fucking serious about the history we're teaching people. We don't need to teach people about about a white history experience, because that's what everybody already lives. And so I think that with sexism, racism, pandemic, all of these things compiling on top of each other, the world is different. It is changing. It has changed, and it will change more. And I do believe that women are the future. I don't think that there's any way that men can lead us into any sort of a viable, sustainable future, period. And
say that again. Women are the future.
It's not possible for men to be the future and for us to survive. And I love that, I love that Baha'i kind of thought process of I think it's women are the left wing, men are the right wing of the bird, and humanity is the bird, and we got to flap our wings in unison to lift up and all that kind of stuff, right? And there definitely has to be a great deal of that humility coming from the male-centric portion of entertainment, of politics, of everything.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing more of it. And I'm seeing more men that they're really struggling to learn it. They're struggling. It's a struggle.
It's scary because you're in this position for so long, and you don't even know how fortunate you are, or how you don't even see your own privilege. Yeah. No. And then suddenly it's being threatened, and you don't know how to react.
Yeah. Yeah. That's much it. I just came back from the beach, so I'm like, I got a little salt water up in my eye.
Beach problems.
Yeah, beach problems. Poor me. Yeah, but I think that really that's what's happened at work is, I think that it took a good 5 years for me to understand that the history that I was presenting was not the history I want or need to present. Mm-hmm. I can let other people do that history. American Pickers really, there's a lot of people who could jump in and fill my role, and they know it and I know it, and that's fine. But what I do bring is a different perspective and a really loud mouth, mm-hmm. and I think an ability to understand, and this is what I keep thinking, that I'm going to get fired for my thoughts, or I'm going to get fired for what I say, or I'm going to get fired for stripping, or I'm going to get fired for this, or I'm going to get fired for that. Because I have gotten fired for it a couple times in the past. Early on, network did not like it. And it was interesting to have that conversation with them and just be like, wait, you produced the history of sex. You produced the history of the Playboy Mansion. You produced the history,
but all of the history is over there. It's not sitting in their office living and making that history. That's confrontational.
Yeah. So that's been a very interesting thing to watch the comfort level come around. And I'm very, very thankful for Mike. Mike is, I no longer work with Frank, but Mike is, he has been an advocate for me. He has, and production has advocated for me too. And I'm really, really thankful to be in the position that I'm in, because I think a lot of other people in my position wouldn't necessarily have the same amount of freedom. Mm-hmm. And so I am pushing the boundaries as hard as I can, waiting for the day when they're like, get the fuck out. And I realized through the process of that I am I'm in a crew of people that genuinely love and protect me. And so it feels good to actually like, it was hard to go through all of those difficult times for the first 5 years, but I think I needed to, because when you're testing the boundaries, you're always going to get slapped on the hand or told no or pushed back or pushed down or whatever. But yeah, I thought that was like my favorite part of learning all of it, is just realizing that, we're all just people and we're all pretty fucked up. And we all just have to be patient with each other and all that kind of stuff. I'm probably rambling. I'm really good at rambling.
You're great. Yeah, it's all about grace, right? Extending that grace to each other and giving each other room to make mistakes and learn from the mistakes. So, we've all made mistakes in our past. I know that I have, and I think about them and I cringe. And, and all I can hope for is that I can receive some grace as I grow and learn and change, just like everyone else, right? Like,
Michelle, we're white. We do cringy shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we grew up with a different understanding of mentality in the world due to that one thing. Yeah. And I tell you, man, we all come from ignorance. That much, I hold that deep in my heart because, I thought like 12 years ago when I was only doing like modeling and stripping and that kind of stuff. There's so many things that I look back on and I'm like, my parents really raised me to be socially aware and hyper aware in so many ways, but they never taught me not to wear a fucking Confederate flag shirt.
Oh man. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's these pieces that our parents and our the establishment that we grow up in, education, whatever, teaches us. And then there are the pieces that we have to learn on our own. And everybody makes this kind of weird little fucked up places in their life where they're like, aha. But what you're talking about is the grace to receive the information that somebody else has to set forward and be like, look, this hurt me. This hurt my feelings. This hurt me financially. This, I don't like the way that this works. This feels wrong, whatever. And for us to be like, well, shit. Okay.
Right.
Take a minute, breathe, have my little moment of white panic or whatever it is, and then understand that, what, it's okay to make a mistake. And I have a friend who's sitting here telling me, look, this hurt. And we can take all of that and we can run with it. We can grow and all of that. But I think the beauty of it is that when we actually can grow and be okay with the fact that we're fuck ups, we come from ignorance, all of us.
Yeah.
And that's especially me, dude. I grew up in Iowa. Iowa and Colorado.
How many syllables was that?
Iowa and Colorado, where they still put down pit bulls for fun.
Oh,
like,
no.
You know what I mean? Like we come from places and we have to learn past those places, and that's okay. Yeah. And I'm lucky to have a great support system, especially out here, where those conversations can be had in a safe space and somebody can take me out to lunch and be like, you look great. How's life? Hey, that post you made the other day. Just so you know. Just so you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's appropriate.
When it's done in love and like, just like that, between friends, I think there's a lot of learning and teaching that we can do with each other. And just on that one-on-one level, like that's where all the action is, right? Is having those tough conversations with each other. And and looking back at your past, I mean, you can easily see how much that's fueling your present, and that you're such an advocate for all of these things. And you're working so hard to bring attention and raise awareness to these causes that may not get enough attention. Right.
Well, I think that like core of that, because my parents were missionaries. So I think the core of that really comes from like when we were, my parents hate it when I talk about our, the poverty of our childhood and stuff, because they tried to make it look so hard. Like we had everything, you know, but, when there were times when the congregation had to come and fill in, and well, I'd come home from school and there'd be like bags of groceries at the front door and bags of clothes and, you know, like little letters and notes from the congregation. Like that kind of stuff is so lovely, and those beautiful parts of growing up. But that just, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. Right. So you have like these traumatic things that can happen, but there's always, if you look, there's always something that you can take out of it as like a power source, something that you can grow by. And so I look at that and I'm like, you know, my parents are amazing people. They got brainwashed, unfortunately, into a situation, but they're incredible people who made sure that other people were cared for, and you know, and they made their mistakes in terms of their white experience and their very sexist religious experience and whatnot. But they loved everybody. They invited everybody, as long as you were in the fold in the congregation, everybody was invited to the house or to the party or to whatever. But it's always that like fear of the other, that fear of like the black sheep, the what they would call the black sheep, but the like those who are like dirty in the congregation, because you're supposed to keep the congregation spotless. So, but you know, like all of the rest of it, I took away. I had a sister approach me when I was like 12 years old at the Kingdom Hall. She had never spoken to me before. I didn't like her. I thought she didn't like me. And I remember her coming up to me after one of the meetings when I got called out publicly for some behavior. And I'm pretty sure and she came up to me afterwards and she's like, you know, Danielle, I just want to say something to you. And I was ready to, I was like, cock that arm back. I'm like, go ahead. And she goes, when you come to these meetings, just remember, take only what you feel you need and leave the rest behind. You don't have to meet up to everybody's expectations all the time. All you have to do is take what sits in your heart, and the rest of it, leave it there. If the elders want to counsel you on what you dress like or what, you know, what your actions are or whatever, if there's something you can use, take it, and the rest of it, leave it there. Because that's not your shame to carry. That's somebody else's perception of what's going on in your life. So
that's a formative moment.
Yeah, hugely. Yeah. And it's funny too, because it came from somebody who I really thought just hated me. I thought she was like, she had a little boy that was like around my age. I think she was scared of that. So I was like, oh, that's cool.
Well, before we head out, I want to talk about your stripping history, because again, this all of this lines up to like perfection. And I love that you're doing this, and I want to know more about it. So tell me what you've learned. Tell me what's like your most favorite piece that you have in your collection.
Okay. So stripping history is basically just a collective of all of the information I've compiled over the last 12 years of collecting. And we're still working on the website, and I have 4 storage units back home that are still full. So right now we're working on the 2 storage units.
A lot of G-strings, Danny.
Right.
A lot of
G-strings. Yeah. So so basically what we're doing with that right now is most of that's being done out of Puerto Rico. And I think the only model I have right now that's not a Puerto Rican model that grew up here is my daughter, Memphis, because she is, in burlesque and dom work and all of that now. She's a big girl now.
Amazing. Oh my gosh.
Crazy, right?
Is she in Puerto Rico too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She lives right around the corner from me now. So that's really cool. So together with my daughter and my students here in Puerto Rico, we're compiling the Stripping History Museum. It should be open in about 2 months, and it'll be right here in Puerto Rico. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I'm excited. It's a small space.
Yeah.
And it used to be my studio where I would teach my students here. But honestly, like we have so much to show that we thought it would be a great space for, just putting it out there, since we can't travel with it like we used to, because it used to be a traveling showgirl museum. And now it's going to be just everything in one place above sea level, which would be good.
Yeah.
Because my house is sea level. So I'm like,
oh my God.
So Stripping History, I think, we're working on a project right now. There's a grouping of costumes back when I lived in Chicago that I'm sure you probably have seen or have talked about with you, but Lorraine Gale Smith's costume collection. Finally, I found her history. I was able to delve so deep into her history that I actually had to get therapy for it. So
wow.
That therapy.
Is she the one that owns that bar or used to own that bar in Chicago?
No.
Someone else. Okay.
No. I think you're thinking of Lynn O'Neill.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe Lynn O'Neill. But I also have a huge collection of hers as well. But the first project that we're working on, we're doing our best to turn it into a 4-part miniseries, like a 4-part true crime docu-series on her life and her death. And it's just an incredible story about a very young woman. She's 24 years old. Her name was Lorraine. She really excelled in theater in high school, and she lived in Boston. So she ended up working in the combat zone in Boston in the 1970s, early 70s. And she then went on to travel around the country. I know for sure she worked in LA, because she was in a couple of movies in LA, and then came back to Boston and was interviewed by Roswell Angier, who wrote the book, A Kind of Life, Conversations in the Combat Zone. And I bought the book because I knew Hetty Jo Starr was in this book, and I bought the book, and Lorraine is on the fucking cover of the book in the costumes I own.
Oh my God.
That was the last night she was alive when they took the photos and did that interview. She was in the costumes that I have that night on stage. Ooh. And so it's such a really, it gives you just chill bumps everywhere, because it speaks to what happens so often within sex work and sex work adjacent industries like striptease, where you're unfortunately are surrounded with men sometimes that don't understand no, and don't understand, that you are something outside of that. And so it's interesting. So we're filming that right now, and we're putting it all together, but that's what's going up this month on my Patreon. So this is the first time I'm publicly telling her story. I've not shared it publicly yet, except for with my top patrons on Patreon. They get to go with me on the journey. But yeah, so I'm very, very excited about that portion of it. And I've been working with Caitlin Regehr, who also I worked on the Tempest doc with. They invited her and Namisha invited me into the Tempest doc. And so I've been working with Caitlin, just talking with her about this, because she has so much great information about, she specializes in feminist studies, and especially this kind of stuff. So it's going to open a really necessary conversation about sex work, sex work adjacent industries, consent, also going into a lot of incel structure and why things happen the way that they do, why people like myself get death threats, people like yours. I don't know if you get death threats or not. We have very different fan base, my fan base is American Pickers, which is predominantly a very conservative fan base. And I deeply appreciate the fan base. But there are certain tiny factions that are very incel in nature. And so kind of, it's an interesting thing for me to study right now because, with all of these things happening in the world, it just kind of puts an exclamation point on this story.
Yeah. And telling the stories that need to be told and maybe bringing about some kind of justice or some peace for these people.
Something.
Yeah.
Even just to start the conversation and have people rationalize and understand, because this man who murdered her spent 40 days in psych and then was let free for the rest of his life. So he took her life and then he walked on an insanity plea. And it's conversations like that that really need to be had about how about white male privilege really is what it comes down to.
Right.
And so, again, it goes into those kind of like incel conversations of men who can't hear no, who won't hear no.
Right.
And yeah, so
it's like breeding that toxicity, right? Like these people are having children and teaching their children this. And so it just goes on and on and on. So we have to get it at the root, at the source and start changing those minds now.
Totally. Instead of teaching little girls to protect themselves and not get raped, I mean, we have to do that anyway, unfortunately, but we need to teach young men how to care for and love themselves so that they don't feel the need to take that power that.
Yeah. And it's okay to cry. And I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah. I had a very interesting conversation I'll talk to you about in private at some point, but it is, people don't understand that what we do when we go out and we perform nude on stage, it is an act of revolution. That's what it is. For some people, it's not.
Taking up space is revolutionary.
It absolutely is. And people don't like it if they're threatened by it. And they'll use any means necessary. I've definitely had people threaten me with guns. I've had people threaten me with, it's wild to think of how many situations I've walked out of just through conversation, just through going, you know what, look, I understand that you're upset right now, but this doesn't need to be part of our conversation. So let's put this away. Let's talk about why you're angry with me. Why did you bring a gun to my show? Why did, and it's happened more than once. And that's what's interesting about it is it's like, and it only comes from the fame from American Pickers because with that, you know what I mean? Without that, you're really kind of like, we would otherwise be just kind of like yelling into the void, right? Only talking to people who speak our language in terms of all of these things. So I don't know, man. I think I think that I've lived maybe a very unique piece of burlesque and striptease history because of that. But I wouldn't give it up for anything. Mm-hmm. I'm still here, and
it's ground zero, that's where the change happened.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's difficult to have those kind of conversations, and we shouldn't have to be the caretakers of male fragility, but you also have to survive those conversations. So sometimes you have to be.
Right.
Interesting. It's all just very interesting how things work out and how good and bad are just kind of
both are true is the theme of this whole experience. And I know I've talked about it before on this podcast, but it really is like something that I have to keep coming back to and reminding myself of that, these really opposite things can live together in the same space. And that doesn't make one more true than the other.
And they have to, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I
tell everyone where they can find you and learn about all this amazing stuff that you're doing. What's the best way to get all the Dani action?
So you can definitely Patreon is always, that's always where I'm at more than anywhere else. You're not going to find me on social media. I hire people to do that. I don't.
Is Patreon under Danielle Colby?
Yeah. That one is, I'm pretty sure that's under Danielle Colby. And you could do strippinghistory.com or daniellecolby.com. And each of them have links to Patreon. Social media is always great, but you're not really going to get me on social media. You'll get me on Patreon.
Yeah. I love your boundaries on social media. Big fan.
You love what?
I love your boundaries on social media. I'm a big fan. You're like, oh, you don't get to comment. Bye.
I know everyone's like, this is supposed to be a forum for everyone. And I'm like, no, this is like my house. If you shit on my rug, you have to leave.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a bad puppy. You gotta go. Spanking and a hug and all that. Bye-bye.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me and having this really wonderful and honest conversation. It's super inspiring. So congratulations on all the work that you've done and all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And I'm just following my friends. My friends are the ones who just tell me we need this, we need that. And I'm like, okay, we'll see if we can do that. So that's it. But I just, I'm so happy to see you push through this difficult year because you have such an important voice and perspective of striptease and burlesque and your own history, I'm glad to see so many people pushing past it. I know we've lost a couple burlesque performers to like muggle jobs and stuff like that. But I'm so happy that you're doing this. And it's helped because we all can find a different voice too.
Yeah.
So keep doing it. Thank you. I'll continue to listen.
Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Remember to spread your legs and spread the love. Follow us, follow Danielle, get all of her stripping history. You can follow us here at I Look Down There or me at Michelle Moore. And as always, a friendly reminder to grab a mirror and look down there. See you next time.